Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller. Tonight is Wednesday, April 6th, and you are tuned into Alaska Weather. Thanks for joining us this evening. As always, you can stay up to date with all of our products at our website, arh.noaa.gov. You can also use weather.gov/Alaska. It'll bring you to the same location. Our weather info line is 1-800-472-0391, and that is a 24/7 line if you want to talk to a forecaster or have additional questions that you can't find the answers to on the website. You can find us on social media, Facebook, NWS Alaska for all three offices, and on Twitter at NWS Alaska using the hashtag AKwx for a regional perspective, and this show and a few other segments will be available on YouTube later this evening. So let's jump right into it. Our headlines for this evening, Wednesday night. Blowing snow is going to continue for the northern portion of the state, the North Slope. We do have that strong easterly flow there like we talked about yesterday, and that will continue on through the remainder of the week here. A warm front is going to bring rain to southeast Alaska, and that is just a continuation of what we've been seeing. Above normal temperatures for much of Alaska. This is all the way up into the interior portions of the state where Fairbanks hit 50 degrees today. Their normal high this time of year, just to give you perspective, is 39. And our pattern is fairly stagnant, not expecting a whole lot of change very quickly. There will be some nuances that will move around throughout the pattern, but no major storm systems that are really going to bring a really robust, impactful change. So let's take a look at our hazard map. As you can see here, again, those easterly winds along the North Slope, the Brooks Range and the Beaufort Sea coast. That's where we have all of our advisories out. And these are, again, for blowing snow. Visibility is reduced to about a half mile in those pockets of blowing snow. And so with that, if you're out traveling or whatnot, just be prepared for those conditions. For the northern slopes of the Brooks Range and the central Beaufort Sea coast, that is out until 6 a.m. Saturday. For the west and north Arctic coast, those are out until 6 a.m. Thursday. And then for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, that is out until 6 a.m. Friday. So check your latest forecast from the Fairbanks office to get the latest information on those. Now for our breakup map, again, not a lot of change here, not a lot to talk about. Not seeing a lot of breakup yet, but with these warm temperatures, be prepared to stay tuned for this map as we expect some changes in the not too distant future. So taking a look at our satellite loop this afternoon, let me slide over here so you can see our biggest plume of moisture coming into southeast Alaska. This is really where much of the jet energy is confined, is over the southern portion of the Gulf and then pushing up into southeast Alaska. So with that, our high moisture stream pushing off there into the Panhandle and bringing some rain and some snow to higher elevations just in Dixon Entrance region and starting to spread northward now. Out over the western portion of our area of responsibility, we do see this elongated, what is now an occluded boundary. All the air has pretty much stabilized. The warm air and the cold air is not really a lot of boundary there anymore, so we called it an occluded front. And with that, just some light rain and maybe a little bit of snow towards the Pribilofs, but light rain for the areas near Dutch Harbor and starting to spread towards Cold Bay. And that's associated with the low pressure system that is filling off northwest of Shemya. Taking a look at the mainland portion of the state as we watch the loop again here, we can see our front that was trying to approach the southern portion of the state last night has now pretty much fallen apart. We have seen some rain showers along the coastal areas, and we have seen some wet weather for the Alaska range. But as far as areas in the Cook Inlet region, they have been mostly dry with some cross barrier or flow over the mountains has helped us to stay mostly dry throughout the Cook Inlet region. Up over the interior portion of the state, just a few spotty snow showers here along this boundary, and we'll talk some more about that when we get into our surface maps. But otherwise, a mostly clear day for much of the interior portion of the state. And then as we get up to the Arctic slope, we can see some of those lower clouds and blowing snow just hugging right there along the coastline there. And otherwise, our only other area of low pressure to talk about is off to the northwest of the Bering Strait, and that is starting to weaken and move off as well. So here we are looking at our surface map now, starting out over southeast Alaska. You can see our warm front there is starting to spread some precipitation, mainly in the form of rain, all the way up into the Dixon Entrance region, and that will continue to make its way northward. Just a few spotted rain showers, places reporting rain this afternoon. The bigger story was the rainfall in southern portion of the state, where we saw Portage and a few other locations reporting steady rainfall there. And again, not a whole lot making it inland, maybe just a few showers over the Alaska Range this afternoon. As we look out towards the western portion of the state near Bristol Bay, just a few isolated rain showers there as well. And along the central Aleutians is where we had that occluded boundary, and with that, some light rain being reported at Dutch Harbor, not quite as far east as Cold Bay, and then just some mixed precipitation as you get out over the western portion of the Bering. Not until you get all the way to the northwestern portion of this low do we start to see enough cold air to turn things all the way over to snow. Some snow showers wrapping in the backside of that as well. Those will probably make their way into Shimia by later this evening. As we look towards the mainland portion of the state here, we can see much of the day was clear across the interior portion of the state. It wasn't until you got far enough north that you saw some clouds up there associated with this Arctic boundary. This is more or less a stationary boundary, but cold air to the north, warm air to the south, and so you can see there some mixed precipitation south of the boundary, some light snow showers, and this is really being caused just because of that difference in the air masses. This high pressure up here is rather strong at 1,040 millibars, and so with that, that's where we see that gusty easterly winds moving across the northern portion of the state at about 25 to 45 miles an hour, and that's where we get those blowing snow conditions. As we go into tonight, you can see not a lot of change expected. Basically what's going to happen is that this warm front associated with this low pressure is going to continue to swing to the north and east, and with that we do have some moderate rain in the forecast for the northern portion of the Panhandle, starting to spread from Skagway up towards Yakutat. We will see some snow mix in for higher elevations, so be aware if you're planning on any travels through White Pass or Chilkoot Pass. Over towards the central portion of the state, we do have some continued spotty rain showers, mainly for coastal regions, possibly mixing with snow over higher elevations near Chitina. But otherwise, for the most part, it'll be relatively dry across the southern and the interior portion of the state. Again, our Arctic boundary is off to the north over the Arctic coast and then stretching back into the western portions of Canada. And with that, we just continue to see those gusty easterly winds riding right along that boundary, and we'll have the blowing snow conditions for the next several days. Off towards the northwest portions of the state and the Seward Peninsula, just some light pockets of snow and fog for those areas up there, with warm air pushing in, riding up over the cold air mass, helping to create some foggy conditions. Down towards Bristol Bay, we do expect some light rain tonight as this front continues to fall apart over the area. And then out over the central Aleutians, some mixed precipitation in there near Dutch Harbor and Cold Bay as we see temperatures cool off overnight. And then again, our weakening, it is now just a trough of lower pressure associated with that low off to the western Aleutians. On into Thursday, we see for southeast Alaska here, this frontal boundary has taken shape just a little bit better. It's tightened up just a little bit, down at 995 millibars now. And so with that, a pretty good warm front will help to change things to all rain, and again, some moderate rain in the forecast for areas of the northern Panhandle. It will push a small trough into the Copper River Basin, helping to bring some snow for Thursday for those areas, or excuse me, some rain for that area for Thursday. Over the Cook Inlet region and off towards Bristol Bay, we see just some spotty rain showers, not a whole lot of weather to talk about there. Same story for the interior portion of the state and off to the west coast. Just some cloud cover expected with that general moist onshore flow, helping to produce cloud cover, but not a lot of forcing to produce the lift we would need to see any heavy rainfall or snowfall. Our Arctic boundary continues to slide just off to the north and east as this area of high pressure does move just so slightly east, and so that's why we have different timing of those advisories ending at various times throughout the rest of the week. So again, stay tuned to your local forecast so you can stay up to date with those advisories and exactly the details with those. And then our new area of low pressure is going to move northwards from the North Pacific towards the central Aleutians on Thursday, and that's going to bring a round of gusty easterly winds through the central Aleutians out towards Dutch Harbor and Atka and Adak. And so with that, expect some near gale force winds and another round of rain and snow becoming all rain as that system moves in. Now into Friday, we can see over southeast Alaska our warm front has fallen apart. The area of low pressure that it was associated with has moved off into northwest Canada. And again, that's really helping that our Arctic boundary is gone, but that moisture will ride up and over, and so therefore we have some widespread areas of snow, some blowing snow if you're traveling off to the east, and again, just a light rain and snow mix once you get a little bit further to the south. This should be all rain except for the higher elevations of the southeastern portion of the state. Now that area of low pressure that we saw on Thursday has slid a little bit farther to the north and weakened some by Friday, and so therefore we have seen some precipitation make its way into the Alaska Peninsula, but again, nothing expected to be heavy and staying mostly dry across the interior portions of the state, the central and southern portions of the state. Should see things improve along the Arctic coast as those easterly winds do subside a little bit, and slow showers will continue along in through the Bering Strait and off into the western Aleutians as some colder air wraps around this system here. Let's take a look at your temperatures here for southeast Alaska for today at 4 o'clock. We did see many places climb into the low 50s. Klawock was 52 degrees. It was 45 at Juneau, and by Skagway you were 48 degrees. So fairly warm temperatures once again for southeast Alaska. Towards south central Alaska, we saw Yakutat at 44. Valdez was at 39 degrees, the cold spot, and 45 degrees there at Anchorage. Up towards the interior portions of the state, 48 degrees this afternoon at 4 o'clock at Fairbanks, but like I mentioned, they did hit 50 degrees. And otherwise, generally pretty warm conditions through much of the interior portions of the state as well. Even all the way up into the northern portion of the state, still temperatures above normal, with the Brooks Range reporting in the low 20s to upper teens, and the Arctic coastline reporting temperatures in the single digits and near the low teens. Out towards the Seward Peninsula at 4 p.m., it was 23 degrees at Nome. And down towards the southwestern portion of the state, we saw King Salmon at 49 degrees and Dillingham at 42 degrees. Bethel came in at 46 degrees this afternoon. Out towards the Pribilof Islands, 35 degrees there at St. Paul, and low 40s were the general theme as you move from the Alaska Peninsula out towards the 40-degree mark at Dutch Harbor. So looking at tonight's overnight temperatures, we do see generally upper 30s and low 40s with widespread cloud cover once again as we saw there on the satellite. We'll see Cook Inlet region and much of southern Alaska in the low 30s, maybe a few spots in the upper 20s, and then we'll climb down into the upper 20s as you get towards the Fairbanks and interior portions of the state near the Tanana Valley. Along the Brooks Range, we'll see temperatures drop to the single digits, and won't be until you get all the way to the Arctic coast that we expect temperatures below zero. Out over the Seward Peninsula, generally upper teens and low 20s for tonight, and southwest Alaska will be in the low to mid 30s, with mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula out towards the western Aleutians. And for tomorrow's high temperatures there on Thursday, expect temperatures in the mid 50s, even some low 60s for the southern portion of the Panhandle as that warm front pivots through the area, bringing some warmer air. It'll be generally upper 40s and low 50s once again for the afternoon highs on Thursday for much of southern and central Alaska. And then towards the Brooks Range, we'll see temperatures in the single digits, and Arctic coast will be in the single digits for highs on Thursday. The Seward Peninsula will be in the mid 30s, and southwest Alaska, you will see a warm day as well, upper 40s and low 50s. So pretty warm temperatures to start out here in early April. Taking a look at our flying weather now. Our pocket of MVFR and IFR conditions associated with that warm front pivoting through the area there over southeast Alaska, mostly over the waters. But we do see some IFR conditions along the Alaska Range, with MVFR being a little bit more widespread. Up towards the Arctic coast with that blowing snow, expect IFR conditions, and out over the western portion of the state and eastern portion of the Bering, some IFR conditions expected out there in the morning as well. Now into the afternoon, not a whole lot of change. Again, a fairly slow moving pattern. We have some IFR conditions associated with that warm front there, moving from White Pass off into Yakutat. IFR conditions will continue in the blowing snow for the Arctic coast, and over the central and eastern Bering Sea, we expect IFR conditions with some low stratus. So taking a look at our passes now, Inutuvik will be VFR, another nice day for those folks. Add again VFR conditions as well. Lake Clark and Merrill should improve from instrument flight rules to marginal visual flight rules through the day. Rainy will also improve from MVFR to VFR. Windy, similar story there. Isabel should be VFR throughout the day. Same story at Mantasta. And Tanina will be visual flight rules. So Portage will be improving to visual flight rules from marginal, and Chilkoot and White will be improving from marginal to, going down from marginal to instrument flight rules as that warm front approaches. So taking a look at our freezing levels now for tomorrow morning, again with that warm front coming in, freezing levels rising all the way to 10,000 feet. It's not until you get up to the southern portion of the state where you see freezing levels in the Copper River Basin in the surface, but even the 2,000 foot line is pushing up over southwest Alaska with those warm temperatures expected. So icing is going to be fairly high, above 8,000 feet for much of the Gulf, above 6,000 feet for the northern panhandle, above 4,000 feet for the southern portion of the state, and this is all going to be fairly spotty icing, only in the heavier showers, and above 2,000 feet and 3,000 feet respectively out over the eastern Bering, and then just a small pocket below 2,000 feet up there near the Seward Peninsula. Taking a look at our jet stream now, much of the energy remains well south of the state, diving down at about 160 knots in support of that area of low pressure that's developing, but then turns again and dives all the way down to the North Pacific before riding back up. This is called the North American Ridge here, and this has been fairly stout for the past month, month and a half, and that will continue to be the case. We'll see the jet bringing most of the precipitation into southeast Alaska at about 105 knots. Taking a look at our 9,000 foot winds now, our strongest core of winds is going to be centered around this area of low pressure as it develops, 55 knots out of the east, and out over this area of low pressure, another area of 55 knots southeasterly flow near the Dixon entrance, and that will continue to ride up into the central portion of the state, 25 knots out of the east. Taking a look at our 3,000 foot winds now, same areas of concern, 45 knots there in the eastern portion of the Gulf as you get just to the outer waters of the southeast Alaska. Easterly flow over the mainland at about 15 to 20 knots, and then out over the Gulf, the Bering, we'll see counterclockwise flow around this area of low pressure at about 50 knots. So with that, we just have a few areas of light to isolated moderate turbulence below 6,000 feet over the Panhandle, and our only occasional widespread moderate would be right in the center of those core stronger winds below about 9,000 feet associated with that developing low. Stay tuned, we'll be right back with your marine forecast.
The quake has generated sea waves up to 30 to 35 feet.
The 1964 earthquake and tsunamis all but destroyed 5 of Alaska's 7 largest communities. 106 of the quake's 115 fatalities were caused by tsunamis.
Huge wave. It was water, lumber, and debris just coming down like it was just going to engulf me.
The largest tsunami that hit Seward came from Prince William Sound. But much like Lituya Bay, landslides in Seward kicked up monster waves at the shoreline that rolled out in all directions with little warning.
Oh my God, here are the oil.
These are the fuel tanks of Standard Oil that were burning.
Yes.
And they tipped over.
Yes.
And the tracks actually went clear down through here, but you see, this all fell in and then just dropped the tracks right in the water.
Brothers John and Bob Eads were building a dock a mile or so south of Seward when the ground started shaking.
This is where we were, though, when the wave came down on us. We were right on the beach there at Lowell Point when we heard these. It sounded to me like drums, big drums beating, way off in the mountains. And all at once the ground we were standing on was just rolling up and down. They say it went up and down 8 feet. Then that triggered this wave that came down on top of it. And see, that ground shook for 5 minutes like that. And this came down on us within the next 2 minutes. We knew waves out at sea travel about 15, 18 miles an hour. We didn't realize this baby was going 100 miles an hour.
We seen the wave, we got in the car, my brother-in-law and I, and of course the road we had was only about 2 blocks long. We got up to 60 miles an hour in 2 blocks. And back, he was in the pickup, in the 4x4 3/4 ton pickup, military. When the wave hooked us, then we went with it into the trees. Then there was a 45-foot boat came down on top of us.
I never went 20 feet where that wave hit me right in the back and just started going me end over end like this. I didn't even know which way was up, and everything went black because that water was all mud, you know, you couldn't see anything. We had a huge stack of timbers there that we were using to build this marine railway that we were building. They were 12 by 12 timbers, 20 feet long, and each one of them weighed about 1,000 pounds. There was a huge stack of them, and they were going right with me. and they were just hammering that pickup to a pulp now. And I knew if I ever got out of it, I would never survive one of those blows with one of those timbers. I finally had to come up for air, but this happens in seconds, you know. I mean, I traveled 900 feet, but when you're going 50 miles an hour, you can go 900 feet in just a few seconds.
Oh, sure.
Whenever I got out of that pickup, these timbers were still around this pickup, just terrible. And one of them hit me right full length, the whole side of me here, from my ankle clear to my shoulder, hit me lengthways. It's a good thing it hit me that way, or it would have killed me. It would have hit me endways. But it hit me full length, turned me black and blue full length too. But it also crippled my leg where I couldn't walk.
We thought it was a sea lion grunting. We couldn't figure out what happened to him. We heard him grunting down there, so my brother-in-law went down there, and he was on the road, hanging on to an alder bush there to keep him getting washed back in the bay. He was almost drowned.
Besides, I'd ingested quite a bit of water in my lungs and my stomach, and I had heavy clothes on. I was full of sand. I weighed 200 pounds, but I probably weighed 300 pounds. Finally, I just laid there, and I couldn't even yell or anything. I just made a grunting noise, and that's what they heard. They got me out of there in good shape, or the next wave would have got me.
Several weeks went by before Bob remembered he'd been filming the burning oil tanks with his 8mm camera just before the wave hit. He told journalists from Life magazine about it, and the search was on for that film.
In that submerged car that I was in, my movie camera was in there. And about 3 weeks later, I got the movie camera back, out of it, and put it in the bathtub and washed it out. It was full of mud and sand and stuff, salt water.
They sent the film to a lab in California that analyzed every soggy frame.
And they blowed up each frame, and they knew the speed of the camera, of the 8mm, and from that they could tell the heights and the speed of that wave.
And what did they say?
It was about 125 feet high, and it was traveling at about 100 miles an hour.
Though there was nothing funny about coming face to face with a life-threatening tsunami, the Eads brothers had to laugh about a note that came back with Bob's film.
They had a note in there that said, "This film has been wet. In the future, if you want good pictures, keep your film dry." And we got a kick out of that because we didn't have much choice.
There were other laughs along our tsunami journey. You don't want to miss the fishing styles of the Bears of Katmai.
And welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that segment. Taking a look at our sea surface temperatures, not a lot of change out over the Bering Sea, where we have northeasterly and northerly flow, so keeping things pretty cool out there. But the one area I do want to draw your attention to is the 50-degree water that's making a surge up along the coast there, kind of coming around the coastline of the Gulf of Alaska and making its way towards south central. So warming waters as we continue into the warmer portion of the year. Now taking a look at our sea ice, you can see here it is continuing to move very slowly. A few areas are breaking away. A few strips of ice are breaking off the main ice pack and move off to the northwest under that northeasterly flow. They're moving, off to the southwest with that northeasterly flow. Otherwise, not a lot of change expected. Maybe a slight reduction in the ice out over here as we had some better satellite analysis out towards the Gulf of Anadyr. And otherwise, for Cook Inlet region, again, ice-free conditions except for the Matanuska and the Susitna River ice. Matanuska and Knik River ice. So as we get into our marine forecast, southeasterly winds for the inside waters, 25 knots becoming 15 knots out of the south towards Lynn Canal, 3 to 6 foot seas. Out over the open waters, 30 to 35 knots, not 35 feet. Gale force winds and southerly and southeasterly flow and seas will be on the 12 to 14 foot range. On into Friday now, we see that warm front has pushed through, so we have now westerly flow coming in behind it with some higher gusts down there over the southern portions of the outer waters, 30 to 35 knots and seas 11 to 12 feet. Inner waters will see 20 to 25 knots out of the south and southeast, seas generally 4 to 5 feet. Now for south central, we see generally northerly and northeasterly flow through much of the area. Strongest winds are going to be out over the open Gulf where that warm front is expected to push into. 35 knots out of the north there, just south of Cordova, but otherwise generally 10 to 15 knots. Open water seas will be between 6 and 7 feet, and for the inner passageways we'll see 2 to 3 feet. Then into Friday, we expect flow to switch around to the south and southwest as we see the open waters become about 20 to 25 knots in 7 to 9 foot seas. Towards the western Barrens and the Cook Inlet region, we see southerly winds becoming easterly, 10 to 25 knots for those regions, except variable in 10 knots for the Prince William Sound and northern Cook Inlet. Out towards the Alaska Peninsula, generally southeast to easterly flow, 10 to 15 knots, fairly light there, 5 to 7 feet south of the peninsula and 1 to 6 feet on the north side. And then we start to pick things up a little bit as that area of low pressure develops off to the west, so we see flow become more southeast and east, 30 to 35 knots generally, seas 10 to 11 feet on the south side and 6 to 8 feet north. Out over the Aleutians, a little bit more confused flow here around that area of low pressure. We see northwest at 15, but then becoming generally east and southeast, 25 all the way up to 40 knots there south of Adak, and seas are going to be on the order of about 9 to 12 feet on Thursday. On into Friday now, we see easterly winds just north of the Alaska Peninsula at 35 knots, but otherwise we have kind of a variable flow as that area of low pressure develops northwest, becoming westerly and southerly, 25 to 35 knots until you get off towards the western Aleutians northwest at about 30, seas on the order of 11 feet. Towards the west coast, northeast and easterly flow 10 to 20 knots and seas fairly calm near the ice pack at 2 feet, 8 feet near the Pribilofs. And on into Friday, northeast and easterly flow picking up a little bit now, gale force winds south of Macquariak there, and generally higher seas at 8 to 9 feet. Over the Arctic coast, we expect generally easterly winds with that blowing snow continuing, 30 to 35 knots, the strongest up there. Off the Seward Peninsula, only 10 to 15 knots, a little bit more variable direction. And on into Friday now, starting to bring those winds down, but still out of the east, 30 knots, and again, more variable off the northwest coast, 15 to 20 knots. So recapping our weather, we do have our blowing snow advisory out for the northern portion of the state, the northern coast of the Brooks Range and the Beaufort Sea with easterly winds, and that will continue into the overnight. Otherwise, our warm front will slide up from southeast Alaska into south central Alaska, and a new area of low pressure will develop by Friday out over the central Aleutians, helping to swing some rain into the southern portion of the Alaska Peninsula. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, fueling philanthropic programs and dedicated to creating educational and professional opportunities for Alaska Native people.